Out here walking 13-acre patch, gathering up some of my game cameras and pictures, see what's going on. I'm going to have to mow this down this spring, early spring. Starting to get too grown up. Noticing a bunch of broom straw in it. I have to get some lime on it. Help it out some. You see a lot of deer been browsing in here. A lot of browsing going on right now. Hey folks, welcome to Deer Corner. Glad to see you. Glad to see you back at the channel. So, been out here on this 13-acre overgrown patch, collecting up some of my pictures from some still cameras. Got some does, got a nice young buck. I think he's an 8-point. And I get out every once in a while, about every day really. I get out, I walk this around it. One time around's about 3/4 of a mile walk, so I get my exercise. And I gotta mow it down here shortly. And I noticed I got some broom straw coming up, so I gotta get some lime down on it. Then I'm gonna let it grow back for another year or 2 years before I mow it again. But that's something that people talk about, deer habitat. And a good deer habitat, you got to have a lot of grazing. You got to have a lot of grazing. And they got to have a lot of roughage. And staying natural, getting natural grazing, natural roughage. So, been working on that. And especially what happened this early January for the first 2-3 weeks. A lot of deer sure appreciated me leaving this overgrown, this 13 acres overgrown. It gave them something to get by on. And for some of you that watch YouTube, and this gets back to deer habitat, the bottom line, the bottom line, need to have his head slapped. Somebody should have popped him up the back of his head. And he's talking about hinge cutting. Now I understand hinge cutting. I do understand. I understand where they're coming from. But he's hinge cutting maple trees. And hinge cutting a maple tree, an ash tree, or some sycamore trees, you're not helping deer at all. You're hurting deer. A lot of people don't know that. But he needed to be popped up the back of the head. And the bottom line on that is, every spring, maple trees have a seed. Some of them call them whirlybird seeds or helicopter seeds. And they have a very big abundance of them every year in the spring. And your does and your wildlife, especially your does that time of year when they're nursing, that gives their milk a little extra and gives them fawns a little more in their milk to get a little boost the start of the year, the start of growth. So go ahead and hinge cut them down. Cut them down. Don't give them that one little bitty seed. There's thousands of them all over the ground that the deer pick up. And don't give that doe any extra in her milk for that fawn to get an extra boost for the springtime of year to get growing. And yeah, that's deer management, all right? So you got to be careful about deer management. and what you're cutting. And getting back on hinge cutting and cutting the wrong trees. Now, I cut trees down. We're going up to the mountains this weekend. We call stumping. And I cut a tree down. I always select a tree. If there's 3 maple trees and I can cut one down and open up the canopy, I'll cut it down and I'll paint the stump. Same thing with my oak trees. 3 or 4 oak trees close by together, I'll cut 1 or 2 of them out so the other 2 will grow. Open up the canopy a little bit for a while, but then the oak trees that are there will get larger and cover it up, but I still get an acorn crop, and then I'll paint the stumps. The reason I paint the stumps, I want to keep the stumps alive so I get sprouts out of them. Yep, I want the sprouts coming up, grazing. Gives them something to browse, deer to browse on through the wintertime. As much browsing as you can give. And that's something that you got to work on. If you're going to maintain deer, hold deer, have deer all year long on your property, is your browsing. Don't worry about the food plots. Matter of fact, this year in South Carolina, some food plot seed people have been putting out can't be used no more. Switchgrass, don't get caught planting it here. It grows 4 or 5 feet tall. It's invasive. It's plugging up waterways, plugging up ditches, creeks, and rivers, causing the water to back up. As much rain we've been having, now you can't plant switchgrass. Buckwheat, can't plant buckwheat due to the fact that we have a lot of apples, peaches, fruits, vegetables grown around here, and they use the bees to pollinate. And buckwheat turns the honey a dark molasses color, and they can't sell it. So buckwheat is a plant or seed that you cannot plant no more here due to the fact it ruins the honey. So you're going to get down in the food plots and do a little deer management. Better start checking the regulations now, because a lot of them are changing due to the fact that things are getting planted that shouldn't be. They're not native. Stay with your native plants. And that's like pine trees. And I had a question why I cut all my pine trees out. Pine tree's not a native tree here. Now, I'm not trying to get back the way it used to be. A pine tree is a sucker. What I call a sucker, we call them suckers. They're fast growing. They'll suck everything out of the ground. And if you let them get away from you, they'll kill all the ground cover. They'll cover and kill all the ground cover, and they'll ruin your deer habitat. And I get in and I cut all the pine trees down I can. If you had a pine tree next to an oak tree, and over a period of time, that pine tree will kill that oak tree. Pretty soon you'll start noticing fewer and fewer acorns coming out of that tree, because pine tree's taking the nutrients. Next thing you're going to notice dead limbs in that oak tree. And it's going to, sooner or later, that pine tree will kill that oak tree. So pine trees, as far as management goes, and timber management goes, no, they got to go. And girdle cutting. I watched the bottom line, girdle cutting. Well, whoever thought of girdle cutting, these popped up back the head. That's my opinion. Who wants a bunch of dead standing trees that you're going to take your son or your grandson or a friend out walking through the timber with a bunch of dead standing trees? Last time I knew, they were called widow makers for a reason. That's because a tree limb can snap off and pretty well finish you off. So you're going to go out in your timber and do a bunch of girdle cutting to kill a tree and leave it standing. That's kind of stupid. And just think about it. Your grandson or your son, and you're out there and you girdle cutted a tree, killed it last year, and a limb snaps off on it. hits your son. What do you think? Why don't you just cut the tree down all the way? If you don't want the wood for firewood, leave it lay. You're still opening up the canopy, and as that tree rots, it puts nutrients back into the ground for what you open the canopy up to get to. So why don't you just cut it down? And if you can't figure out to use a chainsaw to cut a tree down, you shouldn't have a chainsaw anyway. That's my opinion. So girdle cutting isn't a good option at all to me. I think it's stupid. And cutting and killing a tree and leaving it standing up. So I'm going to be heading up to the cabin. We're going to do some stumping this weekend in 2 weeks. It's going to take about 4 days to go through. I got about 50 or more stumps to clean up. And I'll bring you along. Leave me a comment and go ahead and subscribe. And I'm going to show you how to bring in some native plants this spring and improve your grazing for your deer this spring. So thanks for coming along, and I'll see you next time.